Welcome, digital media students, either on the internet or in the wonderful classrooms of Brooks Composite High School. My name is Mr. David Brown, and in this lesson, we're going to be focusing on posing our models using an armature in our intermediate 3D modeling program. Let's get started. So, where we're going to begin is with a completed low polygon model and an armature that has been attached by following lessons 1 and lesson 2 of the intermediate modeling program. So this is part of our second project. The first project had us sculpting a bear. The second project here is understanding how we can create these low polygon models and begin to move them and pose them using an armature. The first two lessons are wonderfully provided by the content creator Infencia. I really enjoy Infencia's programming. He is an excellent tutorialist on low polygon models, and there will be a link in the description as well as a card provided above for both videos so you can follow along and create your own low poly police officer or firefighter or whatever you want it to be. For the project, I'm hoping you turn it into some sort of forest ranger because I'd like you to interact it with our bear that we created for our sculpt. So as you can see, we're starting to weave all these things together. Well, first things first, we need to have this armature and we need to be in pose mode in order to get into pose mode. So if you're in object mode to begin, so make sure you have the armature selected and it's properly parented to your low polygon model. And then we can go up top here, left click on object mode, and then select pose mode. If you are a hotkey junkie, you can hit the wonderful world of Control Tab on your keyboard, and voila, and I am in the pose mode. So back in object mode, Control Tab on your keyboard gets us into pose mode. That is a very fast way to do it. So Tab puts us in edit mode, and then from edit mode, we can go Control Tab to go into pose mode. Whatever mode you're in, Control Tab will always get you to the mode that you want to be in. Now that we're in pose mode, we have the capability of moving around our bones. We have to pay very close attention to how we're moving these things around. So the first thing I want you to do is make sure we're going to go back into edit mode. Now, the first thing you have to make sure that you do, if you are in perspective view, so you have the camera slightly tilted, or you're kind of in this mode here, you want to hit number 1 on your numpad to flip to front orthographic view. And then you want to recalculate that roll. So Shift N, and then we'll recalculate the roll to the view axis. All this does is make sure that all of the rotations of the bones, or the rolls of the bones, I shouldn't say rotations, the rolls of the bones are calculated accurately because they're going to do what they're supposed to do. So now let's go into our pose mode. And I just left click up there. Now I can pivot around and select some bones so we can start to pose. So we want to make sure that everything is still peachy keen jelly bean from where we left off in the Infencia tutorial. So we're going to do some rotations. So if I rotate around the X axis, so R on the target bone, and then X to rotate around there, I get a nice pointed up and down toe. So if I hit escape, I don't want to lock that in. I'm going to spin around. We're going to hit R again, and then I'm going to hit Z on my keyboard and make sure that the toe points opposite of our target bone. And if you're wondering why I'm using the target bone, it's because in the tutorial provided by Infencia, we set up a very basic inverse kinematic system. So this target bone actually does a lot of the controlling for us. So if I actually want to move this, if I click this leg bone, for example, and I hit G on my keyboard to move, you'll notice I can't do a lot with it. It's kind of locked in place. And the reason is because inverse kinematics are set up. So if I start to move this, the target, it will work really, really well. And the bones that are stuck out in front here, these are the pull bones. And so they're a pull that is set up to guide the inverse kinematics, saying, hey, don't really go further than this, because if I do go further than that, notice what happens. And then it starts to get all wonky. So this is kind of the guideline of the push, and then it locks down at the ground. So it creates this nice little arc, and very, very, very good for animation. So my animation students, if I sauce this video at you for some extra views, you can take a look at understanding how this is really important to understand as you start to animate, because you can see I can create much smoother movement as I move this target bone. So hitting escape, I'm going to reset this. So I'm just going to do a Control Z for a reset. If you need to reset anything at any point in time, keeping an eye on my screencast keys, what I can do is hit Alt R, and that resets all rotations. Alt G on my keyboard resets all movement, and then Alt S on the keyboard resets all scales, but that's not a big deal right now. So in this scenario, we wanted to make sure we reset the movement. So if I hit G and move, and then I go Alt R, there's no rotation. But if I go Alt G, it snaps nicely back into place, and it's ready to be used. So let's get posing now that we understand how we're going to get this moving. It looked like everything had been set properly. I'm not too worried about the Y-axis roll, although that is set up really well. That I know that is a problem once you recalculate that roll, but it's looking like everything has been set up in our inverse kinematics very, very well. So what are we going to do for a pose? Some basic posing that you could do is a nice run cycle. You could have this as the knee going up, and we could rotate this foot. And notice, just with this target bone, I'm able to create a very nice little run pose. So this is actually, it kind of looks like Karate Kid. Let's go to the front. Wah, Karate Kid, ha-cha! So we could do that, but we can use a run. So in this one, this is the knee drive up. Again, just the target bone. I'm only moving this target bone. We had everything set up properly. And if you haven't set everything up, again, I will link in the description below and throw a card up for Infencia's rig and low poly model tutorials, because they're going to be extra important to making sure that you can pose your model properly. So we've got a little bit of a pose going on here. That's not really a good run. So I'm going to now use my root bone, and I can push it down a little bit. Notice the root bone is a wonderful way to start moving this body into a run pose. Notice, in order to move my bones, I just hit G on my keyboard and I can get that rotation. So I could also hit R and get the same effect. G and R for most bones have the same effect when you're posing. You have to be very careful. It also depends on your view. So in right view, notice that I can just tilt this, I move it up and down. But if I go to front, now I'm rotating around this axis. So it depends on your view and where the bone is positioned, and in this scenario, where the bone is. So now this one, notice, I can move it. If I snap down, this one moves. Mainly because it's not attached to the root bone, it is offset, which is great. Undo those. Let's put this guy back up. And we are going to bend it forward a little bit, because when we do run, we do have a little bit of a forward motion. I'm going to now reset this. Oh, so see, right here, this tells us that the inverse kinematics were not set properly on this bone. So I'm going to select this bone. We're going to fix that really quickly. So nothing was changed in here. We don't want to change anything in these two object properties. I just wanted to make sure everything was set properly. So now we want to go to the constraint. And in this circumstance, we're copying the rotation of this. And now we're inverting on the Y and the Z. So is that going to be accurate? So we also, too, looks like as I move this, this looks like I need to inverse. We need some invert on the X. So back to here. That looks like it's good. Test this bone. Okay, everything is set. So this one is set. Let's double check our rotation on our Z axis. So our Z. Oh, make sure we got that target selected. Z, and that one is inverted. So let's swap that out. So back to this bone. Inverting that Z we don't want. So our Z. That looks good. And zoom in a little bit. And we're going R. And we want to go around Y. And that one looks pretty good. Let's make sure we spin it to the back. So we want to make sure that this follows. That looks pretty darn good. I'm pretty happy with that. Okay. We got R, Z, yep. RX, yep. Perfect. All right. So we want to bend that toe down just like we got there. So hitting 3 on my number pad, flipping to right orthographic. And I'm going to pull this leg back a little bit. So G, Y. And I'm going to straighten that out. That looks great. So now we've got a little bit of a run pose coming in here. We got the knee drive in, we got the takeoff coming, and now the arms need to be moved. Look at these arms into place. And all we're going to do is G, and now notice it depends on your view the way this is going to move. So I'm going to flip to that right, and now notice it's going to spin around here. But I can make it spin around Z. We can go forward and backwards. So bringing it down, there goes the hand forwards. And we're going to rotate that down a little bit. So again, R, and I just move the mouse. So G, notice G and R rotate. R, same movement. So I pulled it in a little bit. All of it is completely based on the viewport. So if you're not getting the rotation that you want, you can use your gizmo to swing around. But for my intermediate students, you should be used to the fact that you're using the middle mouse button. For those that have decided to adopt the stylus and you're using it for sculpting and everything else, then the gizmo is your friend. So you definitely want to use the gizmo there. So R, let's rotate that arm in, pull it in here, around the shoulder. And I'm going to just kind of tilt this hand down a little bit. There we go. That looks not bad. I'm going to rotate this up a little bit more. And kind of see, we're starting to squeeze the geometry a little bit, and that's okay. Low poly, you kind of have some weird turns going on. The main thing is there's just not a lot of vertices to start pushing around. So in this scenario, you might see some funkiness going on with the model. We could add some edge loops in here to create some good bend points. But for this, I'm happy with this. So this is not a big deal to me. So again, we're going to do the same thing, except I'm going to start here, shoulder. Swing that shoulder in. We're going to swing it back. Have to swing it out. Notice again, it's all based on that viewport. Shoulder out. We want to flex that hand. Yeah, and see, you can kind of have that big constraint here. We should add more geo there. And Infincia kind of points that out in his tutorial as well. We want to rotate that a little bit. If you're finding you're getting to a point where you're like, I'm just really not happy with the way this is going, what you can do is do a reset. And again, that's going to be Alt-R or Alt-G on your keyboard, depending on movement or rotation. And now you can see that we've got this kind of cheeky little run in animation here going. There you go. That's a half decent pose. Rotate that hand. Slightly changed. Now, if we want to make sure that we're getting the right roll, this is on a Y. So I want to make sure that I flex that. Notice, again, you can see really funky stuff happening. We don't have a lot of geometry there, so I'm just going to leave it alone. It'll work. All right. So there's a basic pose. We can tilt this head up a little bit and make sure I go around the x-axis. Boom. And now we've got a neat little run pose here. I'm actually really happy with this. So what do we do now? Where do we take this? Well, in this scenario, right, we can hide the armature, make sure that that looks good. Yeah, again, I'm really happy with it. But if we go into render mode, right, because we want to render this out. We don't really want to leave this. If we were to animate it, we'd start walking through and we'd add keyframes, but we're not animating this. 3D modelers, what your goal is to really put things into poses to create some selling points to it. You want to make sure that everything looks peachy keen, jelly bean before you add it to your portfolio, because you want to see this model in action. Because if a model is really well done, you can bend it, you can put it into these types of poses. Okay, so armature. How do we get this to look pretty? Well, back in object mode, because we need to add some lights. So in render, this guy looks pretty dark. So if in material, he looks pretty good there, but that doesn't help us at all. In rendered mode, he is quite dark because he needs some lights. Make sure my camera, let's set this up. Oh, wait, I don't even have a camera on here. So we need a couple of things, don't we? First and foremost, we need some lights and we need a camera. So let's create a camera, and our camera is set at the default. And this is actually not a bad spot. We're going to move this out. So G to move, and I'm just going to pull it back and see where it's pointed. Hitting 0 on my keyboard snaps me into camera view, and I can just use a G to move, and I can get my character into frame. And I think that's good. A nice thing is to shoot on the angle, because we're going to create some unique lights. You could shoot it head on. It totally depends on what kind of vibe you're going for. For this one, I like this. This looks nice to me. I might pull it in a little bit and just get a better zoom. So I'm going to pull it down a bit. Let's go back to 0. I like that. That's nice. And this is something I want. A little bit more of a story here. Like he's running away from something or he's running to something. So let's look at that. And he's driven. He's obviously chasing something. Good job, police officer. And now we want to add our lights. So in order to add our lights, we can go back in here and light. So once again, the add menu and light. And then you notice I have this neat option called 3-point lights. And this is a wonderful add-on provided in Blender for free that you can use to create a cinematic light effect. So the 3-point lighting system is a cinematic light effect where you have 3 lights, and we'll go over those to create a much nicer rendered scene for you. To get this add-on running, all you need to do is go edit to the wonderful world of preferences. From preferences, you want to type in try. So TRI is going to be your way to find it quickly, and you're getting the try lighting add-on here. And just click that checkbox and close. You should be good to go. Most times people have save preferences done automatically. If you don't, make sure you save your preferences, otherwise your add-on will not be running. So now that we've got the add-on running, I can go add, light, 3-point lights. And so no visible viable object in the scene. Make sure you have your object selected that it's going to be running with. Add, light, 3-point lights. And now it's all based off of this object here. And you can see we've got some lights. And it looks like they're really far away. Well, that's not too bad. So we've got 3 wonderful lights, and they're all pointed to the origin point of the geometry. So how this works is that the first light I have, this is my key light. And my key light is going to be the brightest light that exists in my scene. The next light that you're going to see is a fill light. The backlight is here to adjust the shadows on this side. So what it does is creates a less lit look here. Full shadows on the back, obviously, and then the fill light kind of encapsulates. So you kind of get to see the character really well lit on the front, and then it kind of blends the lighting as it goes around these curves. And that's the whole purpose of the tri-lighting system. So now all I'm going to do is adjust the wattage. So we go in. So this is my key light. We're going to adjust the power to a point where this gets lit up. And now I want to make sure I'm still in the rendered view. And I'm going to just keep cranking this up. We're going to probably go, I'm going to go about 1,000 here. And boom, oh my goodness, that's super bright. So let's bring that down a little bit. Let's go to about 500. Yeah, that's reasonable, right? I know it's reasonable because if I go into my material mode, I get to see it looks just fine, right? So it's about the same. So this is full brightness, and this is pretty close. So again, my other lights are going to be half the power. So if that's 500, these are both 250. And you can see the effect there. So now back in my camera, zoom in a little bit. I got some really nice shadows on the brim because that would be created. We want it. We want that, right? The brim of the hat is going to provide some shading. So these lights are positioned really nicely, and we've got some really great low poly lighting going on here. We got a nice scene, and that's all set up. So that's the easy way of utilizing the tri-lighting system. So now this looks like it's set up and ready to render. So I like the lighting here. I enjoy the posing here. So let's go into render image, and right now you can't see it because it's not showing up in the wonderful world of OBS, but it looks pretty decent. So I've got a good render result. Let's see if I can get it showing up, and there it is. So just clicking on my render tab, I have the render result showing. Now that we have our rendered image, let's see if we can use this technique with the bear sculpt in order to create a better way to make those paws, squeeze that honeypot that we created from our high poly, low poly. So going file, open, I'm going to get this bear sculpt going, and you kind of see him clicking randomly. You can't see it, but that's okay. We'll bring up this bear, and we have a wonderful bear model. We could probably throw some arms in here, but I'm gonna point out a problem. There's gonna be a problem instantly. And it's not because we can't do it, it's just because we shouldn't do it. And why shouldn't we do it? Because if I go into edit mode with this bear, so just having the bear selected, whatever your bear body is, hit edit. And that alone takes forever. Now, if I zoom in, there's a ton of vertices because this is a sculpt. Sculpting at very high details, especially if you're remeshing properly, is going to create some very, very small polygons. And that means you have a lot of vertices. And if there's a lot of vertices, we cannot create an armature with weighting. as efficiently. I could try, but there's so many points that need to be calculated. The computer would probably spin forever. Before I recorded this video, I actually tried to do this. I put an armature in and then did a parent with automatic weights. And even my computer, which is quite powerful, couldn't actually accomplish the task. So it spun, I let it spin for about 10 minutes, and it still couldn't actually do it. It didn't crash, which means it would have done it. It just takes forever. So that, my friends, is where we need to learn another skill that we're going to pick up a little further down the road called retopology. So we're going to retopologize our models so that they have less vertices, and then we can create some armatures for them. That's it for this lesson. Thank you so much for all your wonderful views and support. If you have anything you'd like to suggest, please place it in the comments below. There should be timestamps and, again, links to Mfencia's tutorials in the description, and please keep an eye out for those cards.